Hey everyone, and welcome to part 3 of our pick grabbing tutorial. And in this tutorial we are going to go ahead and use our HTTPClient library to grab source code from the website. Now for those of you that aren't familiar with Pascal, Delphi, or Free Pascal, I wanted to go over some assignment operators. So for example, if you're assigning something to a variable, you would use := to assign something rather than just equals. You know, that's probably what most of you are familiar with coming over from other languages. Let's take a string variable, string : your value in quotes. So that's kind of what it would look like if you were assigning a value to a string. Now if you were going to use an equal sign by itself, that would mean a comparative operator, such as testing whether something is equal to something else. So you might use it in an if statement, like if A equals C, then do something. So that's the time that you would use equals by itself as opposed to having an assignment operator. So : assigns a value to a variable, and then equals is what we'll test, whether it's a condition or a value. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that at the beginning for those of you that aren't clear with it. Now let's go out, and if you're a Windows user, you're going to need some DLL files for something called OpenSSL, because the website is HTTPS, which most websites are now, and so that means you're using secure sockets when you're making a request. And for that we're using another library called OpenSSL. Now if you're a Linux user, it's probably already embedded in your system, but for Windows it wouldn't be, so we would have to include some DLL files. So I've gone out to indie.fulgen.com, and we're going in the experimental folder here, and we're just going to download one of these zip files. Now me personally, I wouldn't really need this if I was just going to compile this for Linux, but for the sake of this tutorial I'm going to go ahead and download this. And by the way, I left a link in the description below to get to this website. So we're going to open this, and these two DLL files are what we're interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my project folder and just select both of these, and I'm going to just drag them right into the folder. There we go. Alright, so these are two DLL files, and again this only applies to Windows users, that you'll want to have with your executable when you run your app. Okay, and now that we got that in there, we need to include these libraries up here under our uses. So OpenSSL and OpenSSL sockets. Okay, and that way the application we're building knows that we need to use those libraries, and so it will refer to them. And also, for those of you that aren't real familiar, you see our procedures down below, and we got procedures declared first up here in the top of the form in the source code. So these are where your procedures are declared, and then they're written down here. So that's kind of how that works, just to give you a quick overview. And now we're down in our form button click event, and I'm also going to create some variables. So I have to need to put a var in there, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a string variable, HTML, and assign that as a string. Okay. And so as you can see, a procedure, the body is the procedure declaration, then we have our begin and end, and when you have a variable we would also put variable in there. Now I'm creating a function, and we're going to do form1 dot, we'll call it get HTML. Form1 of course being the class that we're in. Let's make that uppercase. And this function is going to return a value. This is the difference between procedures and functions. Up above in the procedures don't return anything, but functions will return a value. a value generally. So I'm going to have some variables in there, so I'm putting a var in there. And then begin and end. End is generated automatically when I hit begin. Now I'm going to press Control-Shift-C, and this will automatically create it up above, but it didn't. Let's see. Oh, sorry. That should be T-Form1, not Form1. Okay, cool. Let's do that again. Control-Shift-C. And as you can see, everything kind of shifted a little bit. That means that it pasted it in up above in our declaration area. So if we go up here, it's automatically put in up there through that shortcut that we did. So that saves you a little bit of having to go up and type it up to there. So nice little thing to know when you're creating procedures and functions. All right, let's create a variable. And first of all, this variable is going to be from the HTTPClient library. So we want to put HTTPClient in our uses up here. So let's come back down here again. And we'll call this CLI, short for client. And that'll be assigned to the TFP HTTP client library. Cool. Okay, now let's make some string variables. URL and HTML. We'll assign that to string. And then, you know what? I think I'm going to add another one in here. Let's make that search. Even though we don't really have anything in our GUI right now, but I think later on I'm going to have a search parameter in there, maybe like a text field or something where you can specify your stuff. Now, what I'm doing here is init SSL interface. What that'll do is activate our OpenSSL sockets. So it's important to have that in there. Now I'm going to just initialize my search variable, which for now is just going to be blank because technically it doesn't exist yet. Okay, URL. We're going to make it our website, which is https unsplash.com. And then I'm going to do a backslash with that, since we're going to use it with a search variable potentially later. And then close that quote. And then plus search. Okay. End that with a semicolon. Very good. Okay, so we got some of our basic variables laid out. Now, let's go ahead and initialize our client. We need to create our client, so it'll be client is assigned to TFP HTTP client dot create. And that's not showing up in the code completion. That's kind of weird. All right. Apparently I have a typo somewhere. Yep, it's not there. Okay. First of all, let me check up under uses. Maybe in the uses area I might not have spelled something right. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything there yet. Oh, right. Okay. Yes, this should be FP HTTP client. Okay, that's the library. Very good. So, still nothing. Okay, did I do the same thing here? Yeah, okay, TFP. All right. And where I declared it. Yeah, I did the same thing. Okay, my bad. That ought to get us back on track. And so if you're expecting to see it in the drop-down and you don't, oh yeah, let me put a colon there. Okay. Wow. Guess I didn't have my coffee today. Huh, still not there. Okay, everything looks okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and retype this. And if I don't see it in the code completion, I'm just going to type it anyway. Okay, yeah, still not there, but I'm just going to type it. It should be .create and nil in parentheses. And I'm just going to just fix my case here, just to be thorough. Okay, I'm going to restart this because it really should be showing up in my code completion, and I think all the little mistakes I made there probably hosed something. So let me relaunch that, and that should kind of reset our code completion. And normally I would, in case you're asking why I didn't edit all this out, I just kind of want you to see the process. Okay, now we should be able to see it. Yeah, that's better. Okay, and there's create. So that's good. And the reason I was a little bit anal about that is because we're going to be using our CLI here again, because I want to turn on allow redirects. So if I type in CLI dot and then allow redirects or redirect, and we'll assign that to true. The website, some websites you need the redirect set to true. Now we're going to add in our header, and this is going to be a user agent. So I'm going to put in quotes user-agent end quote, and then comma, and then the other part of that will be quote Mozilla. Let me think here. /5.0. And then in parentheses, we're going to put in compatible. Forgot how to spell it. Compatible. There we go. Comma. FP web. And then we'll end that end quote. Actually, we'll close the bracket end quote. Close the parentheses. And actually that shouldn't be a comma there, so let me take that out. That should actually be a semicolon, so we'll delete that comma there. Okay, yeah, that looks better. Alright, cool. So that's our header for our user agent. That way we look like a real browser. Now let's make a try catch block. I hit enter and it automatically generated it for me. So I'm going to call our get CLI.simpleGet, and then we'll put our URL in there. So this will actually call out to our website for the request. And this finally, I'm going to change that to an except, because I want to have an exception handle here, just in case something goes wrong when it tries to go for it. We can put something excuse me, in there to show us an arrow. So E colon HTTPClient do. So so we always use a do after this, and then begin and end. The reason I have begin and end is because we're going to have multiple lines. If it was just one line under here, then you wouldn't need the begin and end block. However, we're going to have a few lines because I'm going to write if is console, then, and is console means if your application is capable of consoles. I'll tell you in a minute. Can't talk and write. Right line, and then we're going to put exception in there. This is going to be the message it's going to display to us, plus, and then e.message. This would be the actual error message that it'll display out. Now this right line is only for Linux and Mac. Okay, and now we're going to plus S line break. And this S line break variable is a universal line break for any operating system. And then URL, and then the URL variable. This way, what it's going to do is it's going to show us a message that says exception, colon, and then it's going to have the message, and then a new line, and then our URL. Now, if this is not a console app, in other words, if you're running Windows, it's going to show a message dialog instead. And let's just copy this so we don't have to retype it all. And we'll just put that in our message dialog. And we'll close it. Okay, now in the right line there's no semicolon there. That's because we're using an else in this if-else statement. So if there's just one line and you're going if then else, then you leave out the semicolon. Okay, so if it's an is console, then right line, which is going to show up in the console window. Otherwise, show us a message dialog if you're a Windows machine. Right line doesn't work in Windows because Windows is not capable. Okay, so we're going to put our result down here. That's equivalent to, and we're going to make it HTML. Result is equivalent to return in other languages. And I forgot, we got to enable HTML. HTML, our string variable, is actually what this CLI.simpleGet URL is going to return. So without this, we're not going to have any result, right? So had to add that in there. Forgot about that. So that needs to be there so we can have something. Now I want to be able to see what it's going to return, because the source code is going to be in that HTML variable. And so back to this is console. You know, right line is only for Mac and Linux. Windows is not capable of, it doesn't have a console feature built into their applications. That's why we need an alternative. If you were just a Windows user, you would only need the show message line down there, and you could forget about the if-else block. And for Linux users, if you're not interested in creating a Windows version of your app, you don't need the if-else block either. You can just simply have the right line in there. I have them both in there just for the sake of this tutorial, so you can kind of, if you want to develop for two platforms, you can have both in there. And that's just kind of one way to do it. And for Windows, you know, I'm using a message dialog, but heck, you could use write to a file, or just put in a memo, or which is like a text area in your GUI or something. So those are just some alternatives. Okay, now we want to, when we run this function here, we want to be able to see our result, this HTML, somehow to know that it's working while we're testing. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it down here outside of our exception. And so when we get a result, our HTML, I just want it to display for me so I can see that it's actually finding something. So let's change exception to HTML. And then we'll just take that out of there. And then we're going to put it in our HTML variable. I accidentally undid that. Okay, we'll leave the S line break in there. And then we don't need that. Okay, and we'll just copy this into our show message. And again, if you're a Linux user, you don't really need the show message if you're not going to compile for Windows. Okay, so now it'll show us hopefully some HTML when we run this thing. Now we got to go back up into our button click event, and we need to call our function that we just made. So that would be get HTML. Okay, looks good. Let's give it a run. A little smoke test, see what happens. Okay, not found HTTP client. Oh, that's another exception message. Ah, that should be HTTP client. Okay, because that's an error message. Let's run that again. The other message should clear up by fixing that. Okay. And it doesn't like that. Oh, okay. I see what's going on. This if is console here is inside our try except block still. It's supposed to be outside of that. And I didn't get it quite outside. So let's go ahead and just cut that out of there. And this should actually be just above our result. So this last end line is actually the end of the try block. So now we're outside of it. So we should be good now. See right there, that's showing the end of the try block. So that's where we should be. Let's try this again. Okay. Now I need to look at my console output so I can see what we get here. Now, in case you're wondering how I got that, you just go up to View and then go down to Debug Windows and select Console In Out. Now, if you're a Windows user, this really wouldn't apply, but for you Linux and Mac users, here's our console window, and we'll hit that, and only the HTML text is showing up, but not the actual HTML. There should be HTML underneath that. So I must have missed something. There's no errors down there. Let's try that again. Yeah, nothing. Okay, let's see what I did wrong. Okay, so we have our right line. Lol. That was pretty dumb. Okay, I forgot to put in my HTML variable. So let's do that. And we'll stick it in our show message block. HTML. Okay, that's better. Now if I didn't screw up anywhere else, we should have some HTML showing up on our return. So let's see if we get it. Open up our console window, hit that button, and there we go. Nice. Okay, that's our website loading. That's all the source code. And there's some images links. Those are probably what we're going to be going after. Nice. Okay. So, looks like it's working just fine. Now, I'd kind of like to put this down in my, next to my messages window down below. So, the way to do that, if you want to dock that in there, is I would just reach over into this yellow area and I'll pull it down and let up on it, and it's above it. That's not really where I want it. I actually want it in the tab right next to the messages tab. Let me try that again. I think what I need to do is put it right inside this messages window. That should do it. Yeah, that's better. Okay, that's what I want. See, we have our messages here where we were before, and now we have our console. And so that way it's kind of always available to me when I want to refer to it. It's kind of nice. And I'm going to just kind of stretch that over too, I think. Make that bigger. Come on, you can do it. It's kind of lagging here because of my video capture software, I think, probably. Or I just got a cheesy computer. All right. Cool. That's better. Let's launch this again. Now, I'm just running this again so to show you that it's a little more convenient. Now when I run this, it's just going to show up right there, and I got easy access. Cool. Okay, and that's going to do it for this video. Thanks again for watching, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button or hit subscribe. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next video.